Good morning. I'll be reading from Romans chapter 12, verses 4 and 5. For just as we have many members in one body, and all the members do not just have the same function, so we, who are many, are one body in Christ and individually members of one another.
When we first began small groups at the beginning of last year, it was a way for us to increase our community here at Snellville, a way for us to get to know each other better, also a way for us to be able to apply the things that we hear on Sunday mornings from Harold. When we get together on Sunday mornings and we hear that lesson, sometimes we may have questions, sometimes we may have things that we want to dig deeper into the lesson, and we don't really get a chance to do that. So small groups is a way for us to be able to take those things that Harold says and apply them to our lives and to be able to talk about them more and to be able to get a little bit deeper into the Word.
What I enjoyed most about small group was the ability to get to know people on a personal level, the chance to be vulnerable on a smaller scale instead of in front of a large congregation. That way you're more willing to share some of the struggles you have with your faith. So I think that's probably what I enjoyed most, to know that I'm not alone in some of my struggles as a Christian, as a wife, as a mother.
You get out of it what you put into it. So if you come willing to be a part of it, then I think you'll also get a lot more out of it. And again, the relationships are tremendous. I mean, some people that I knew who they were, but I didn't really know them. And now I feel like I know them a whole lot better.
Take my co-leader, JC and Phyllis. They're just wonderful people. I would have never gotten to know them as well had, it not been for small groups and spending time with them.
One of the things about small groups is you're in a setting that's much different than when you're here on Sunday mornings. It's much less formal. It's much more comfortable.
In our group in particular, we have a meal each Sunday evening after we meet, and I think that gives us a chance to get to know one another on a more informal basis. And actually, we served one another. We had a family that had a baby, and we were able to provide some gifts for that. And we had some folks that had some issues with their children that we were able to pray for them and provide support for them.
We've also had the privilege of having some of our adult children be part of the group, and that's been a pleasure not only for us but also for the other people in the group that have gotten to know them on a different level, and just getting to see kind of the impact that, again, the worship service or lessons make in their lives and how they perceive it from a different perspective than what we're hearing.
If some people are on the fence about whether they want to sign up for a small group, I would encourage you to at least find one in your area, to at least find one that's close to you, to visit and to see what it's all about.
Part of our fear is not knowing. So until you try it, you just don't know how you're going to be blessed by it.
The closer you are to someone, the more you could help them, the more they could help you. And that's what this is all about.
It's just a group of people like all of us that, want to get together and want to talk about life. And, hopefully one of the things that we're going to keep doing is taking the lesson that was presented on Sunday morning and discussing how we can implement it and apply it to our everyday lives. And they'll make friends. I can guarantee they're going to make friends that they haven't had before. And it'll be a way of, I think, connecting in this congregation that hasn't been there in the past when we just show up for Sunday morning or Sunday night, Wednesday night, small talk, and then leave. And I think that's one of the best things about small group is the deeper connections that have taken place because of it.
Good morning. Did y'all catch that on here? Good morning. I'll speak up in case it isn't quite on. I am so glad that you are here this morning, that you decided to join us this morning. We are, as you know, starting back our small groups today. This is the Sunday that we get started for the year, and I am excited about that. I'm glad to be getting back to that and getting back together with our groups. Some of those groups have changed a little bit, which is not a bad thing. I think that's actually a good thing, because people are going to be able to get to know other individuals that they didn't get to know this last year. And I think that's going to be a great thing, and I think it's going to be tremendous, not only for our congregation, but just for those individuals within those groups to be able to get to know other families. I want to start by saying thank you. Tom Cutter, who handles our videos now, is our deacon over that, put this together for me fairly short notice. So I appreciate him and the work that he does, and the fact that he has a talent there and a skill that hopefully he sees, because I think most of us see that, and that he has that talent. And I just appreciate the leaders that we have, and the men and women in this congregation that step up and do so many different things. I heard we had a great Ladies' Day yesterday, so I'm grateful for that. I saw a picture on Facebook of that, and the ladies that attended there, and I'm glad that they had a good time here and enjoyed each other's company. And hopefully, I'm sure we're spiritually fed yesterday as well. So I appreciate that. I appreciate all of our young people as well that are here, and the role that they play. Spencer getting up. He always does a great job doing the scripture reading. Today I gave him a really tough one, two verses. So I appreciate that, though, and I definitely appreciate Rick's prayer and what he had to say in that. I think he must have looked at my outline, before he said that prayer, because he had a lot of great things in there that kind of goes along with my lesson this morning. And I will say that I am extremely grateful for Harold, and not just because this is going to be recorded and he's going to hear it later, because I'm sure he's going to go back and watch this over and over again. I'll probably hear it playing from his office this week when he gets back. But I am grateful that we have him. I said something this morning about, I apologize that our better preacher was not here this morning, that I'm kind of the backup. I'm the second string guy. But I appreciate him and the work that he puts in to his lessons and the time he takes to do that. I asked him about being a part of these interviews, and I sent him a text, and I want to share you just something he responded with. He said, of course, that's Sermon 101. If you want a great lesson, interview Harold. And I told him that I wanted to do that so that it would appear as if he hadn't even left, and then he wasn't gone. And then he said, they'll nap during my video. So no, I told him he always does a great job, and I appreciate the work that he does, and am thankful for him and for what he means to this congregation. But that does kind of lead me. Harold and I, we joke a lot. He jokes. He likes to joke when I have to take screaming children out, and usually that happens because I have 4 of them, and so one of them usually has something going on, and he jokes about that. We kind of joke on each other. But it's because we love each other, and because we get along so well. I'm so grateful for the staff here that I get to be a part of, and we are really we're close, and we get to spend time together, and we don't always see each other a whole lot during the week if we've got things going on and we're in our own offices or Harold's visiting people. But I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that group of people, and that kind of leads me into what we're talking about this morning, which is this idea of community. Okay, and that's really what that's kind of all about. And I want to go back for a minute to the verses that were just read, and again, those are very short. But Paul here is saying quite a bit in just a few short verses, and he says in Romans 12. Verse 4 and 5, he says, "For just as each of us has one body with many members, and these members do not all have the same function, so in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others." Paul is describing in these verses, and also
later in 1 Corinthians, right? He's describing what the church is like, and he's using this description of a body, this analogy of a body that has all these different parts and all these different members, and each of them plays a different role, but somehow they all come together, they all fit together, and they all share a commonality. And I appreciated some of that, like I said, that Rick said in his prayer about that unity and being unified. And I hope that is what we're like. I hope that we are fulfilling those words of Paul, and being that body that he calls us to be. And there's another way that could be described as you listen to those words that he uses. It's also very similar to that of a community of believers, right? A group of individuals that is unified, that comes together for a common purpose or a common goal. And that's exactly actually what the definition, if you look in Webster, okay, the definition of community is a unified body of individuals, okay, such as the people with common interests living in a particular area, or a group of people with a common characteristic or interest living together within a larger society. Okay, this is the actual definition that Webster gives. And as you look at that, it's very similar to what Paul is talking about. It's very similar to how he's describing what the church is like. Now, at some point or another, and even right now, all of us have been or are part of a community. All right, and I don't just mean the city that you live in, okay, or county or whatever it is, okay, but in different areas in our life, we're part of communities. Okay, if you work somewhere, you may have a work community, right? If you go to school, you've got your school community. Okay, well, you go to the gym, okay, because it's the beginning of the year and we're all going back to the gym for about a month. Okay, and then we'll see what happens after that. Okay, but then you're part of a community there. And so all these different areas of our life, we have these communities, we have these groups of individuals, but we all have some kind of thing in common, right? If you're part of that gym community, it's because you're trying to be healthier, right? You're trying to better yourself. Okay, and you're looking after your physical needs. And you go and you're a part of that work community or school community, right? And you have different aspects of that have brought you together, are things that you have in common. And then you come to church, right? And you're part of a community. You're part of a community of believers, and the one thing, if nothing else, that we should have in common that brings us together is Jesus. Okay? And without Him, we wouldn't be here this morning. You wouldn't be listening to me. You don't have to amen that. Okay? You wouldn't be listening to me this morning. You wouldn't be sitting next to each other. You wouldn't be encouraging each other. You wouldn't be building each other up. Right? Because we wouldn't have that main purpose. And so we have something in common that has brought us together. All right, let's look at those verses again. We're going to go to the verses in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul talks about this as well. And he says, "So that there should be no divisions in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it." It should bring us comfort to know that when we come here, that we have a part. Okay, that we are a part of the body, that we have a role to play within the community. And the truth is, right, if you take your community, your actual community, right, the city that you live in, okay, and often we refer to that's our community or the people around us. And sometimes when we think about that, I'm part of this community, but sometimes we think, what kind of role do I play there? right? I live here, right? I own property here. I own kind of own property. The government kind of owns it too. So, but I have property, right? I have a house, and I live here, but what do we do, right? Do you ever stop and think, what am I doing in my community? What am I doing for my community? Am I a functioning part of my community? Now, there are different things that we can do, right? You go out and you vote. That is being a part of your community, okay? That is part of what we call our civic duties, okay? And we may do certain things like that, but when we sit back and sometimes think about it, or when I sit back and think about it, I think, well, am I doing what I could? Am I really being much of a part? And sometimes it's overwhelming because you think of how big it is. All right, you think of some of the cities around here. Now, Samantha and I, we moved back up here. We grew up here, and we moved back up here from Americus, Georgia, okay? And some of you may have no idea where that is, and that's okay, because a lot of people don't, okay? But it's in South Georgia, and it is a much smaller community, all right? Much smaller community. And then we moved back up here. It's like, wow, there's so much more to life. Okay, there's so many more restaurants and shops and things. And also, along with that, so many more people. And sometimes when you get in there and you think about how many people there are, right? You think about how many people there are in your city, or in your county, or in Georgia, or in the United States, or in the world. You think, wow, I am one person among all of those other people. And sometimes it can be overwhelming if we really think about it and think, what can I do really for my community? But you read these words of Paul, right? You read that he talks about all of you are part of this body, and all of you are members, and all of you have a role. All of you have a function, have a part to play. And sometimes it can seem difficult to find our part because there's so many. And even here within this congregation, we get here and we think about how many people are here on Sunday morning. And sometimes it's easy to kind of get lost in the crowd. Sometimes we want to get lost in the crowd. Okay? But it can feel overwhelming. And so what do we do with that? How do we find where our part is? The verse again in Romans 12, verse 5, he says, "So in Christ we, though many, form one body, and each member belongs to all the others." Right? We all share those things with each other. And I think that if you look at the community, okay, and you look at, we kind of fall into two categories, okay? And one of those is what I would call an accidental community, okay? A group of people that you're kind of with by chance, okay? Maybe you didn't select those people, but you're with them anyways, okay? If you're part of a family, right? Everyone has some kind of family that you're around. You heard the phrase, right? You don't get to pick your family. You're stuck with them. Okay, well, I don't know if that's part of it, okay, but you can't pick your family members. Sometimes we wish we could. Sometimes we wish we could select different ones. Okay, now a disclaimer, I'm not talking about my family because most of them are here this morning. All right, so I'm not talking about my family. And maybe this just in general. Okay? All right, but we don't get to pick, right, some people in our life. Okay, in school, kids especially, right? You're in school right now, and it's based on where you live. Right? Our kids go to Cooper Elementary, and it's because of where we live. We live within that school district, so they go there. So when they started going to school there, they really had no choice of where they were going or who they were going with. Now, if you go to someplace like GAC, right, you can choose to go there. Okay, there are some schools you can pick, but some of that is selected for you. Okay, work. If you happen to get a job, it may just ended up that was the job you were able to get, and you Got that? And so you may not have had a whole lot of choice. Now, you could have chosen where you wanted to put in resumes and where you wanted to look, okay? But some of that is by accident. And then there's a difference there in the intentional community is you choose to be with these people, right? Your friends, you can pick, right? You can't pick your family, but you can pick your friends, okay? You can choose who you surround yourself with. And I try to tell our children this because they're more and more getting to that age where who they pick to be around is going to matter in how their life is shaped. Okay? And so you can pick, and it's important who you pick to be around. All right? And so friends is one of those. Okay, a church. Church is kind of in a way an intentional community because you can pick where you go. Okay? You can't always pick who is a part of that group of believers, but you can pick where you sit. Right? Some of you do. Okay? Right? We have those choice seats. All right, but even in this, right? Some of these sometimes teeter on the line with both. And sometimes we have some kind of choice in it. All right? But when we look at this community, and we look how big it is, right? And we think, how in the world can I make a difference in this size group of people? And the truth is, sometimes it is difficult. Sometimes it's difficult to find our part. It's difficult to find where we fit in and where our place is in that body and what role we play in the community. And sometimes it's because maybe we're looking too big. And sometimes we need to shrink down that view and we need to see, maybe we're not going to affect everyone. Maybe we're not going to get to know everyone. But maybe we can get to know someone or someones or a group of people. And I think that this is where our small groups kind of fit into the overall picture of our community. Right? If you think about your community, if you think about your city and where you live, and you think about all the people that are there, and you think, there's no way I can affect all those people, there's no way I can get to know all of those people that are there. Well, maybe you can. But can you affect the people that are living right around you? Can you have an effect on the people that live next door or that live right down the street or that live, right there in your neighborhood? Yeah. Right? It's so much easier when we kind of break it down and we start to think, okay, maybe I shouldn't start thinking about, getting to know everyone. Maybe I should start getting to know, Bob that lives right here. Right? Or Cheryl that lives right over here. Okay, maybe I should invite them into my life or into my home and start a conversation with them and get to know them. Because that's really where it starts. And when I think about small groups, and I think about that in relation to the church, right? I see that as kind of the neighborhood within a community. Right? It may be hard to get to know everyone in your community, but you can get to know your neighbors. You can get to know the people that are right next to you or the city next to you. Okay? And that's where small groups helps us. I appreciate the video that Tom helped put together and all those who agreed to be interviewed for that. And as you were watching that, I hope you kind of heard some very similar things from the people who made remarks and who talked about small groups. And they talked about, one of the main things that I remember them talking about is getting to know other people better. Right? And talking about, I got to know so-and-so, and they didn't name names necessarily, but if you were to ask them individually, they could probably tell you certain people that they said, well, I didn't know this about them. Until I kind of sat down and got to hear a little bit more about them and about their story and about their life and about their experiences. And that's where it happens, and that's where it comes in. I know from my own experience this last year in our small group that there were people in that group that I knew, but I didn't know them. And I didn't know them that well, and I didn't have, I would say a big relationship with them. But I've gotten to really love the people in that group and some of the things that I've learned about them and their heart and things that I would not have known. Okay? And I'm gonna say this, I'm not going to go into detail, but I think the world of Larry. You know, he was on that video, and he agreed, and he's not, one to be in front of people, but I appreciated him doing that, and I appreciate his heart more this year than I did last year because I didn't know him as well last year. Okay, but I do now. And I'm sure the people who are in groups could say that about someone else that they got to know and that they got to meet. And that's what this is. That's what this is for, and that's what this is about. And these small groups are those neighborhoods where we can get to know each other even better. All right. So what else is a part of small groups? And I want to go through this real quickly, but here are some things that I think small groups help us to do with each other and for each other. Okay, and some ways that we can look at this. And the first of those is that they help to serve. Okay, to serve each other. To serve other people. There are so many stories. I heard several stories this last year of groups that served people within their group, and even some of the groups that served people outside. Okay, I know Scott mentioned in the video that within their group they had one of theirs that had a baby, and they were able to get some gifts and to get some things for that baby and for the parents. Okay, and that is a great thing. And I know our group, toward the end of the year, went out for the fall festival that was in the community, that was in the city of Snellville. And we helped to set things up for that. Okay, and I enjoyed doing that because I enjoyed seeing the other people in my group out there being a part of that and working and serving someone else. And it was just great to see. You look at these verses. Look at Acts chapter 2, verse 45. And it says, all the believers were together and had everything in common, right, in verse 44. And then verse 45, it says, and they sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Okay, they served each other. They shared with each other the things that they had so that they could make sure that the needs in that community, in that group of believers, was met. And that those people were cared for. And then if you look at Galatians chapter 6, verse 2, and the words of Paul, here he tells us, as believers, he says, to carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Okay? We have an obligation to each other, right? To help care for each other. To help take care of some of those things in our lives. And this kind of leads into the second thing, which is these groups are here to mend. Okay? Another word you could use is heal, but it fit better with my lesson. To mend. Okay? But that mend goes with a brokenness. And that was one of the things I noticed from Rick's prayer this morning, that he talked about how we all have a brokenness. We're all broken people. And we are ultimately healed through Christ and through His forgiveness and through His sacrifice that He made. But we are also here as a body to help each other to get better and to be better people than we were the day before. Look at the words in James chapter 5. Verse 16. Right? It says, therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. Okay? Sometimes it's hard to do that in a large group of people or in front of a large group of people. If anyone has ever come forward on a Sunday morning asking for prayers, you know that's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing to come forward in front of so many people and to bear your heart, right? And your soul and those burdens that you have. And it's difficult to confess some of those things in front of so many people, but when you get together and you get with a group of people and you start to feel comfortable and you start to feel a bond, it's easier to let those things out and to ask for help and to ask for prayers. Right? That's a big part of it. Because all of us are broken people and all of us have wounds that need healed and that need prayed for. Another one is, as Harold talked about several times, is that we're in these groups to apply. When he gets up, Harold does a great job of delivering a message. He does a great job of getting up on Sunday morning and preaching and speaking, I believe, what God has already said and what he has put on his heart. And he does a great job, but sometimes you sit there and you think of something that comes up and you think, well, maybe you have a question about something he said, or maybe you're thinking about something deeper and you want to share it, but you don't get a chance. And that's another great thing about being in a small group, because you have a chance. Because we get together and we talk about the things that Harold talks about, and we get to share those things. And another part of what they talked about in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, was about that. When they got together, right, it says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, right? They spent time studying together and listening to the words of the apostles. Okay, and that should be a big part of this, is getting together and talking more about the Word. It's also to love each other. John chapter 13. Excuse me. In verse 34 of John 13, he says, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another." Okay? And if you go on to the next verse, it says, "By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." All right? And one of the things that happened in Acts chapter 2, when they got together and they were spending time together and they were sharing the things they had together, right? The people around them saw that. And I think one of the things they probably saw the most was the love they had for each other. And when you get together in a group and you start to get to know each other and you start to get to know each other's problems and struggles and you're praying for each other, then you get to grow in your love for each other. And other people, if they get to be a part of that and get to come in and witness that, will want to be a part of it. And so it's a way we can love each other even more. And the last thing I think it is a way to lead. And going back to those verses in Acts, chapter 2, verse 46. It says, all the believers were together and had everything in common. Go down to verse 46. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. Right? They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. When the people saw the community that they had with each other, that the believers had in getting together and spending time together and studying together and praying together and eating together and loving each other, the other people took witness of it. And I think these groups, one of the big roles that they should have is in leading other people into that same community with us and leading other people to Christ. And I think it happens by people being a part of it and witnessing what takes place. As we said, as I said in the video earlier, if you are on the fence about being a part of small group, right? This last year was the first year we started up small groups, and I think they went really well, and I really enjoyed being a part of them and getting to know people. And some people, may have had a great experience. Some people might not have had as good of an experience. But I encourage you, if you didn't, to stick with it. Because we just started. And the more you do something, the more you get to know people, right? The stronger the relationship will be. And if you're on the fence about whether or not you want to be in a small group, I would encourage you to try it. Find one. Look one up, say, okay, this one's a couple miles from me. I just want to go see what it's all about. All right? It doesn't hurt. When Paul talks about the body, right? And he talks about we all have different functions, right? But the head of that body is Christ. And it amazes me thinking about that and thinking about when that was written and how they had that analogy and put it together. And you think about, when you actually think about the body, right? Where does all the control and the function come from? Right? It comes from up here. It comes from our brain, and it comes from all those different nerves and neurons, and it's telling us what to do. Right? And leading us. And leading our different functions. I couldn't be moving my hands right now if it weren't for my head. And so Christ is the head. He is the one that gave his life for us. And he's the one that should be the focal point in the center of our life. And the one that controls everything else that we do. All right? If you're a part of his church, you are a part of that body. You're a part of that community. But if you want to really get to know some of the other members within that community, sometimes you have to be a part of the neighborhood first. Sometimes in order for us to get bigger, we have to think a little bit smaller. And we have to get a little bit smaller before we can grow. All right, but no matter where you are, it all starts with a relationship with Christ. And with how you interact with him. And whether or not you're one of his children. And he offers that to every one of us. And if you're here this morning and you're unsure about whether you're in the right place in life, or whether or not you've got struggles that you're not sure about sharing, or you're just not sure how to deal with them, there are other people within this community of believers that have probably been in your seat. And have probably been where you are. And have probably struggled. Until they let Jesus be the Lord of their life. And even then, we still struggle. We still have times when we just can't get it together. But he's there. If you haven't started your relationship with him this morning, if you haven't given your life to him and been baptized into him, into his blood, that is where you need to start this morning. And if you haven't taken that step, and you haven't done it, you can do that this morning as together we stand and sing this song.